So many people have come up to me and said, oh my God, meditation has completely changed my life, right? And I feel that way too. And it's not just emotion regulation. There's something else going on. What we found were changes in brain matter in several really important brain regions related to the sense of self and related to stress.
The word that keeps sticking in my mind as you keep saying it is how you react to it.
Yes.
Right? So your reaction to a stimulus, good, bad, neutral, but you react to it in a much more defined and controlled manner. It's almost as if like you have more control over how you're going to react to that situation. I know for a fact that has happened to me. My kids may not agree with this, but I definitely react a lot less now to certain situations. And even if I'm reacting the same way, I think I am definitely able to recover a lot faster just because of mindfulness.
The more you practice, as your mind starts to quiet down, you're able to see more of what's going on in the background.
In today's world, there are so many different apps and meditation platforms and mindfulness programs. How do you as a scientist distinguish what is evidence-based, what is hype? How do you distinguish between the two? Welcome to Think Shift, the podcast that invites you to change your perspective by exploring the incredible power of the human brain and mind. I'm your host, Mantazh Khanna, and I am a brain coach, a neuroscience researcher, and an advocate for holistic health and well-being. My own journey into this work began as a cancer survivor and a caregiver to a family member with Parkinson's. So I've seen firsthand just how profoundly our mind influences our body. And that's why I do what I do. Today, I work with individuals and organizations to build mental resilience, optimize brain health, and to support our healing using science-backed techniques. And as I pursue my own PhD in neuroscience and mind-body medicine, I bring the latest thinking to every conversation. In each episode of Think Shift, I sit down with leading experts to explore how neuroscience, cutting-edge technology, and even everyday practical tools can help us think better, live smarter, and thrive deeper. Every expert that is invited to this show is going to share real-world insights and actionable strategies that you and I can use every day. And my hope is that this isn't just a podcast, but an invitation to you to reimagine what's possible for your mind and body. So, if you're ready for some bold insights, some transformative science, and a few surprise aha moments along the way, you are in the right place. Let's start shifting. My guest today is Dr. Sara Lazar, a neuroscientist at Harvard Medical School and the founder of the Lazar Lab for Meditation Research at Massachusetts General Hospital. Her research has been truly pioneering, some of the first to show that mindfulness and meditation don't just change how we feel, but can actually reshape the structure of the brain. She's someone whose work has deeply inspired me and has guided my own thinking as I pursue my PhD research and brain coaching practice. Now, if you're someone that's interested in brain health, you've probably heard experts talk about the usual pillars: sleep, movement, nutrition, stress. We talk about all of these on Think Shift as well. But what I wanted to do differently was to challenge that framework and ask you, what if mindfulness is the one practice that supports them all? It's actually the foundation that supports how we eat, how we move, how we respond to even stress. And yet, it's also one of the most misunderstood, often skipped, doubted, or even dropped, because we don't really know what it's doing or whether it's working at all. And that's exactly why I wanted to bring Dr. Lazar on Think Shift. Her work helps us answer those questions with clarity, data, and beautifully simple science. So in this episode, we'll explore what happens in our brain when we're being mindful, how long does it take to see real changes, and what types of meditation create different types of impact. We also talk about her recent work on aging and cognition and discuss how to tell what's evidence-based versus what's just wellness hype. So if you've ever been curious, or maybe even skeptical about mindfulness and wanted to know whether it really does something for your brain, this episode is for you. With that, let me welcome Dr. Sara Lazar joining us from Boston. Hi, Sara. Welcome to ThinkShift.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. I know we've had a chance to have a few discussions in person while you were in Singapore, and I'm even more excited for this discussion because we get to share a lot of the great work that you've done. Let me start you off with the very beginning when you did your first few pieces of research and how that showed the changes in the brain that actually occur. Can you take us back to that time when you started out and walk us through what those studies actually showed and how you did them?
Around the time I became interested in this research, a new tool was developed called functional MRI. And so the MRI, it's kind of like an X-ray. It's able to take pictures inside the body. And they had figured out how to take really beautiful, exquisitely detailed pictures of the brain, but also very importantly of brain activity. And so what we know is that when a brain region becomes active, blood flows there. Blood, when it's oxygenated versus not oxygenated, looks different on MRI because it has to do, so MRIs are about magnets, and there's a little bit of iron in blood, and when it's combined with oxygen versus not combined with oxygen, it's different magnetically. Right. So it's a little bit of voodoo, a little bit of whatever, right? And so MRI is able to look at changes in brain activity based on blood flow. But it's also able to look at the structure of the brain in really fine detail. Some people had demonstrated that we could see differences in brain structure between experts and non-experts. So for instance, expert musicians versus non-expert musicians, there was differences in music areas of the brain. Right. And then a study was done demonstrating that you could even see changes in brain structure after 3 months of practice. People were juggling and they showed changes in visual motion areas. And so I thought, okay, 3 months. I had some people who had been practicing for years. So could we see differences in brain structure? And we could. And so the areas we found were areas related to awareness of internal sensations and the sense of self. Yeah. And also an area in the front of the brain which is involved in sort of meta-awareness and being able to think about your thinking. One of the problems with that first study was that they were people who had been practicing for many years. And so maybe it was just that, people who chose to meditate had more gray matter in those regions. So the second study we did was we again used MRI, and we put people in the scanner and we scanned them either before and after an 8-week stress reduction program, mindfulness-based stress reduction program, or just 8 weeks apart.
Right. And these are people who have never done meditation or mindfulness before.
Never. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And so they're novices. What we found were changes in gray matter in several really important brain regions related to the sense of self and related to stress. So one of the big regions was the amygdala.
Yes.
The amygdala is the main region associated with emotions, especially fear and anger and whatnot. We found that it got smaller and that the change in the amygdala correlated with changes in stress. So the more stress reduction people, the smaller it became.
That is amazing, right? And I guess to a lot of people listening, that probably makes sense, right? You're learning to be a little bit more aware, both of your inner self, but also your connection to the outer world. Things may make a little bit more sense to you. You would typically tend to be a little bit less sensitive to reacting to things. And I like to call the amygdala the little fire alarm or the alarm bell that goes off every time something triggers you. And so you become a little less sensitive to it and you don't go off every single time.
We had a really nice follow-up with this study that showed exactly that. Is people with anxiety, and especially social anxiety. And people with social anxiety, when they see neutral faces, so most people when they see a neutral face, it's just a neutral face. The amygdala doesn't light up. For people with social anxiety, a neutral face is danger because I don't know what the person's thinking, right? And it's been shown that their amygdala reacts strongly to neutral faces. And we were able to show that pre-post 8 weeks of practice, that when people with social anxiety saw neutral faces, their amygdala stopped responding, and that the decrease in amygdala activity correlated with changes in their self-reported anxiety, like the clinical measure of anxiety.
Right.
So we were really able to show that the amygdala was quieting down in a way that's relevant to people's anxiety.
Right, and that's amazing. You mentioned showing people different faces, and actually that brought up another question, which was how was this measured? Apart from brain structure changes and the blood flow that's happening, were there other things that you were asking participants whether they were reacting to things generally in their life? Because you can't follow them all of the time and know how they're reacting. But were there other sort of variables that went into the study?
We gave them various questionnaires.
Yeah.
And so the change in the amygdala correlated with the change in stress. And the stress questionnaire is things like, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling like I'm not in control. Work is too demanding, these sorts of things. And so it's just self-report. Some other people have done studies where they make people do public speaking.
Oh, super stressful.
From the camera, and they're told, like, okay, you've got, they give them some topic, and it's like, okay, you need to speak about this topic for 5 minutes, and they give them like 5 minutes to prepare to give a 5-minute presentation with cameras and lights.
Yeah.
And so the cortisol goes through the roof, right? But after 8 weeks of training, the cortisol didn't go up as high, but more importantly, it came back down more quickly. And that's really important because we're going to have stressors in our life, right? But, it's the, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It's like, rather than, oh my God, okay, let's focus, let's figure out how so you need a little bit of a shot of adrenaline just to sort of like, okay, needs my attention, I need to motivate. Yeah. But then can we get it back down and regulate so that I can then execute? And that's basically what we and other people have shown, is that oftentimes you still get the initial reaction, but it's less. But then more importantly, it comes down very quickly. So you're better able to get back on track.
I know for a fact that has happened to me. My kids may not agree with this, but I definitely react a lot less now to certain situations. And even if I'm reacting the same way, I think I am definitely able to recover a lot faster just because of mindfulness. The days that I've done it versus the days I haven't done it, I feel the difference. You also said something really important, and for a lot of the audience that might be listening in or watching this that are concerned about memory in particular. And you mentioned the hippocampus, which is our memory and learning center.
Yeah.
Tell us, did the hippocampus show up in any way in these studies and any changes that were happening to it?
Yes. We found the hippocampus. The hippocampus is actually the brain region that's probably the best studied. The hippocampus, like you said, is about learning and memory. It also is interesting. It's also a brain region. It's very sensitive to molecules in the blood. And so it really is a brain-body interaction. And so it's interesting that it's doing both. We found that it increased in the first study. And then in subsequent studies, what we've shown is that who in the brain it talks to changes. It strengthens its connections. So this is what the idea with the gray matter is. It's like, because if there's more gray matter, that suggests there's more connections there. Right? Or there's more going on there related to how the neurons are talking to each other. And so what we and other people have shown is that more brain regions are talking to this, and the brain regions talking to it are stronger, and it's relevant. All right, so, Pavlov and dogs, right? So the dog, you give them food, they salivate. Right. If you ring a bell, they don't salivate. But if you ring the bell every time you feed the dog, they learn that the bell means I'm going to get fed, and they salivate. So we did the same thing, except instead of using food, we used a very mild electric shock, and instead of bells, we used lights. So they learned that, okay, when I see this light, I'm going to receive this mild electric shock.
Electric shock, okay.
Very mild. Very, very, it's like a little hand buzzer, So first they learned that, but then we unlearned it. So we just showed them the light without shocking them. We then sent them home and came back the next day, and then we showed them the light. And the question was, and we looked at their startle response and also their brain response. And the question was, okay, well, what happens when you see the light the second day? And the people who meditated, again, we did this pre-post 8 weeks of meditation training, or very importantly, 8 weeks of exercise. Because, exercise is really good for stress reduction.
Yes.
And both groups decreased stress the same amount. Exercise really is good for stress reduction. But for the exercise group, there was no change in their ability to remember that the red light, the shock light means I'm safe. Versus for the meditators, they were better able to learn, when they saw that the light the next day, that the light meant I'm safe, right? So they didn't startle as much. They had better learned the connection. And this has important implications for anxiety. There's something called exposure therapy. And this is like a key element of exposure therapy. Is you show people things until they don't react.
Yes.
So that's basically what we did in the scanner. But then remember it. Because it's like one thing, like, okay, you learn, let's just say you have a spider phobia. And so you're in the doctor's office and they show you spiders and it's like, okay. But then you go home and, spider, right? Yeah. So you have to be able to remember it and bring it into your life.
Yeah.
And so this suggests that mindfulness is better able to do that, so that you're better able to remember what those emotional, the emotional lessons that we learn, you're better able to remember them.
That is just fascinating, right, Sara? I mean, as you said, the gray area and the gray matter there actually increases, which equals to increased neural connections. It also increases, therefore, the number of different parts of the brain that it speaks to. Now,
yes,
if I can play devil's advocate, that could also be a bad thing, right? Because if it's a bad memory, then it is also speaking to more parts of your brain and maybe getting you to be more anxious or recalling that old memory more. And I could be totally wrong, but this is what I wanted to ask you. Like, is that also true, or is it only working in one way versus the other?
Context matters, right? So the study with the lights and the shocks suggests that it is context dependent. So there's two, there's the memory and then there's how you react to the memory. Because that's the thing. So let's say, you're out at night and you get mugged, right? You don't want to just forget that, I was mugged, right? And you want to be able to go, but it's important for the context. So you might remember, okay, I don't want to go to that part of town at night, but at daytime, maybe it's fine.
Yeah, you want to learn from it.
Exactly. But you need to learn the right thing, right? And so that's the thing. And so, because some people could overgeneralize that and it's like, okay, nighttime is not safe, I'm not going out at night, right? Or I'm never, ever going to that area again. And so that's the overly general memory. But if it's like, no, if you can figure out, no, it's that time at night, that was a bad time, right? So it's safe during the day, other areas are safe at night. It's just that one area. So that's the thing. It seems like it's really helping with the specificity of the memory. And we do know from other research that meditation makes you less reactive in general, right? So again, with the amygdala. And the amygdala and the hippocampus are very tightly linked. And again, we showed that there was increased communication between the amygdala and the hippocampus in a positive way, right? That it was better able to, it was better learning what the amygdala was had figured out, basically. The hippocampus and the region called the PCC, posterior cingulate cortex, like that seems to be very important for this. Because again, the PCC is the sense of me, and it's also providing the context and the relevance. The insula, which we talked about before, about internal external, was also about relevance. And so these brain regions seem to be talking to each other much more effectively with meditation. So again, you're getting so when you have these experiences, you're processing them differently. So you're understanding it, you're reacting differently, you're remembering them more effectively, your emotional reactivity changes.
Right. And I think
we can't figure out all the different pieces, but the pieces are starting to put together.
Right. And the word that keeps sticking in my mind as you keep saying it is how you react to it.
Yes.
Right? So your reaction to a stimulus, good, bad, neutral, but you react to it in a much more defined and controlled manner, as almost as if like you have more control over how you're going to react to that situation. Is that a good way to put it? Yeah. Okay, amazing. So we need to talk about what is this magic that is mindfulness? How is it doing all of these things to our brain? Why is it doing these amazing things to our brain? Most people think if I said mindfulness or meditation, and right before we start this recording, we were chatting with the crew, and they were also saying, it's about sitting still and thinking of nothing. Isn't that what meditation is? And if so, that's so hard to do. So how would you describe what is mindfulness in your words, given all the research that you've seen, and you can even add a neuroscience, definition to it?
First off, it's important there's mindfulness, there's meditation, there's mindfulness meditation, right? So mindfulness is just being aware of the present moment in this non-reactive, non-judgmental way. And then, as you said, meditation is sitting there and not moving, right? That's at least one form of meditation. I mean, you can also do something called walking meditation. So for instance, there's other forms of meditation, say mantra meditation, where you're sitting there not moving, but you're repeating a phrase over and over and over again. Yes. And that can lead to like a trance state. And with mindfulness, you're not in a trance state. It's more about just being hyper aware of the present moment. Mm-hmm. So they've shown some things like where people go into this trance state that, you can like literally shoot a gun next to them and they don't startle, they don't hear it because they're so deep into the trance. Versus that's not mindfulness meditation. With mindfulness, the gun goes off and you're aware of it. Yeah. So when you sit there doing nothing, as you said, it's hard. Why is it hard? Because thoughts keep coming up. And lots of times there's juicy thoughts. And so the instruction is, okay, just be aware of those juicy thoughts non-reactively, right? Yeah. And so big emotion comes up and you just sit there and let it pass through, right? And so if you keep practicing that, then it doesn't matter if the big emotion is coming from internal or from external. You learn to, okay, that's a big emotion happening. And I'm just going to sit there and let that happen. Because often what happens with emotions is they arise, but then if you just let them pass, they kind of peter out very quickly. And so that's basically what we're seeing with the meditation is that it's this, you're practicing this non-reactivity. So that's a big part of it. And then another thing that's important is with meditation, in order to stop the mind from wandering, you really need to start focusing more and more on the body itself and on sensory signals. So you get more in tune with your body and the signals. But again, doing it in this very open way. And it turns out, body language, right? You can tell a lot about a person by their body language. If you start paying attention with mindfulness, you can start reading your own body language, right? And sort of like, oh, my shoulders are up. I think I must be, I don't feel stressed, but my shoulders are up, so I must be stressed. So, okay, let's come and let's bring them down. And okay, that feels better, right? So we can really start to tune into our body. And so we start learning a ton about ourselves. And that's the thing that starts to change the self is because, like we have habitual ways of holding our body. And it's like, oh, okay, what's going on there? And, so that completely changes how we feel. Right.
So what you're basically saying, it's awareness of your thoughts, observation and awareness of your thoughts, as well as observation and awareness of your body. And you do that in a non-judgmental way. And you do that in a non-reactive way. You let it just pass. Have you done any research or are aware of any research that's been done on different forms of mindfulness or different forms of meditations? And what is more effective than the others?
There's been some research on other forms of meditation and yoga and Tai Chi. In the Buddhist tradition, there's also loving kindness meditation. So there's been quite a bit of research on that. There's also been a little bit with mantra. I wouldn't say that one is more effective than the other. It's sort of like physical exercise, like running versus swimming versus biking, right? They're all generally good for cardiovascular health and health in general. The actual muscles exercise are going to be a little bit different. And so that's what we're seeing with the meditation is that there's similarities and differences. So they all seem to be generally good at the non-reactivity, but there are also differences in brain activity between them. Again, there hasn't been a lot of studies that directly compared A versus B, but the few that have, we've seen some differences. It may depend on what you're looking for, right? So the loving kindness meditation is very good for negative emotions and handling your negative emotions. Mindfulness is also good, but loving kindness might be a little bit better. If you want this, do this type of meditation. If you want that, do that type of meditation. And sort of like exercise, it's like, okay, any exercise is better than no exercise. And so any form of meditation is better than no meditation. Some people like to swim, some people hate swimming, some people like to run, some people don't like running. So I would say similarly with meditation, some people like mantra, some people hate it. Some people like the loving kindness, some people don't. Some people like mindfulness and breath awareness. Some people that's just not right. So some people like yoga, some people don't. So I would say, try a few and then sort of see what works.
Right. So depending on your need, but also depending on what you have an affinity towards and what, you like, as you said, you may try different things. And if you're someone that's new to this, would you recommend definitely trying all forms of it and not just sticking to one? Or is it consistency that matters? Or is it diversity that matters? So you go deep or go wide? Which way would you recommend?
One thing that can happen at the beginning is like, you try this, oh no, it doesn't work. So you try this, oh no, it doesn't work. And you don't give them a fair, you need to try more than once. I'd say do one for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And then if you're really still not try something else. I really need to get a few weeks, to get a sense of, okay, is this working or not?
Yeah.
And then what's nice with the stress reduction programs is often they will include 2 or 3 different types of meditation. And then I would say, sort of keeping one as the main practice, or maybe 2 as the main practice, but then, sort of getting like a little bit of cross-training, right? So it's like, biking is great, but, then doing a little, it's not great for the arms. So, doing something for the arms as well, so like, maybe meditating most days, but then doing yoga or Tai Chi once a week, something like that might be, or vice versa.
So some consistent foundational practice that you keep going over time, but then adding bits and pieces of some diversity to it as well to keep trying new things. Because I'd imagine you'd also want new neural connections to keep forming, and you don't want to just stagnate. And that brings me to the next question, actually, Sara. Do you see, I know you said that with most of the participants, it's been about 8 weeks. Are there any long-term studies that have been done that show that, no, actually, over a long period of time, the effect keeps increasing and actually gets, multifaceted and multi-beneficial? Or is it that after some time it kind of stagnates and then you got to do something else?
So we did a study with novices over 2 years. And what we showed is that, and we compared them to people doing crossword puzzles and Sudoku. And we're looking at cognition. So over the course of 8 weeks, both groups improved. The controls, the yoga, the crossword puzzles and Sudoku, they plateaued and then gradually came back down towards the baseline. They lost the benefits. Even though they continued doing crossword puzzles and Sudoku every day.
And they don't increase the difficulty of those crossword puzzles and Sudoku? It's the same level of difficulty?
Well, I don't know. We didn't ask that. We just know that they continue doing crossword puzzles and Sudoku.
Okay.
And this has been shown with other studies that, like, if you just keep doing the same thing, you don't maintain the benefits.
Sure.
With meditation, and this is the first time I've heard of anything that does this, even though they continue just doing meditation, the benefits continue to accrue. That over the 2 years, they just got better and better and better at sustaining their attention, right? We hadn't taught them anything new, so they were still doing the same thing. So that's 2 years. But then long-term practitioners, yes. There have been a couple studies showing that various questionnaires and or brain regions, you can see correlations between total years of practice and that measure. So it does seem like some benefits continue to accrue over years of practice. So it definitely doesn't stagnate. And so what happens is, so say breath awareness, when you first start practicing, typically you just pay attention to the breath. But then gradually, because the mind keeps coming up, and so gradually you start tuning more into the mind and then also into the rest of the body. And so although the breath may still be the main focus, it's like gradually you include more and more and more. And then also the more you practice, as your mind starts to quiet down, you're able to see more of what's going on in the background. And we don't have any research on this, right? Yeah. But this is just, my anecdotes and anecdotes of many other people. As the voice turns down, like you start to notice more about your mood. There's also the little voice in the back of your head that's sort of always there, but you kind of ignore. But you start, because the main voice is quieting down, that little voice becomes more obvious.
Inner voice.
And so your body sensations become more obvious. Yeah, so a lot of other things you start tuning into things that you never paid attention to before. Because the voice is like, blah, 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 it's front and center. So
it's so important, right? Because there are so many voices and sounds and noise around us. And I don't just mean that literally, I mean in terms of all the distractions, the to-do lists, the everyday that we run after, that we don't really get to take a moment to sit down whether it's in stillness or not, and just listen, go inwards and listen to that inner voice. And I think for me, actually, that's probably been the biggest benefit of it all. Saying hello to that voice. I know you exist, but you're always suppressed. But now here you are front and center, and you get to say what you want to say. And for different people, I think it speaks different truths. But yes, I think that's been definitely a personal experience of mine. In today's world, there are so many different apps and meditation platforms and mindfulness programs. How do you as a scientist distinguish what is evidence-based, what is hype? How do you distinguish between the two? And what do you personally practice?
Going way back. So the first Western scientific studies of meditation happened in the 50s and 60s. But there was just like one or two, a handful. They weren't very good, right? So then in the early 70s, someone did a study, Herbert Benson did a study, where he took people who had never meditated before and brought them in the lab, and he had them meditate, and he showed changes in physiology, like that started instantly with meditation, right? So that was one of the first solid experiments demonstrating that meditation did something, right? You're not just sitting there, right? Because you get this immediate change in physiology, which at that point had never been seen before. In the late 70s, early 80s, a man named John Kabat-Zinn had gone to Asia and realized, wow, meditation and mindfulness, this is really good, and that it's really good for pain and stress. And so he came back, and he and then Herb Benson, each of them independently around the same time, created secular 8-week programs to study meditation. And so when I first started this research, I knew, because again, the research that had been done, even in the 70s, there's a lot of research done. Lots of times it was long-term meditators versus controls, or they took novices, but like, okay, they did, 4 weeks of, this type of meditation, or 6 weeks of that meditation, and there was no consistency, and the findings were all over the place. We couldn't understand the findings. So, but the studies, people had shown that these 8-week programs were useful for reducing stress, and it was reproducible, and the way it was taught was reproducible. So that's why I felt like for my first studies, I needed to focus on MBSR. I decided to focus on MBSR.
MBSR being mindfulness-based stress reduction. For people who don't know what that is, that's the John. Yes, and that's the John Kabat-Zinn program. And then you're speaking of
Herb Benson.
The relaxation response, which is Herbert Benson's program.
Yes, and they're similar in some ways, but they're both secular. They're both 8 weeks. The relaxation response really focuses on relaxation. So it's all they include a little mantra. So what they do, it's 20 minutes a day, and they start with a relaxing body scan, and then mantra, and then a little bit of breath awareness, and then opening up to sounds, right? So you get all that in 20 minutes. Versus an MBSR, it's 40 minutes, and you do just one thing. So you do just a body scan, or just breath awareness, or just yoga. In the first week, you just do body scan, and the second week, you just do yoga, and then the third week, you just do just breath awareness. And then after that, you can then choose which of those things you want to do. But you do just one per day. And so those programs, a lot of the research in the 2000s and 2010s were focused on those programs, and similar programs derived from them because they were manualized and reproducible, and these sorts of things. The research is starting to shift. So now, and there's enough people who are meditating to know that, the meditation benefits accrue. And so there's more interest now in long-term meditation practitioners. But that research, I'd say, is just getting started. And so we're starting to ask different questions and looking beyond the 8 weeks. So there's one app called Headspace, and that's probably the most popular one. They say it's mindfulness, but just 10 minutes a day. And there have been a couple of studies with Headspace showing that, yes, you can get benefits. So one of the studies was medical residents, right? So you don't get more stressed out than that, but maybe. And they showed that after just 2 weeks that, there was a small decrease in stress, but there was a small decrease in stress. It's practice dependent. So basically the more you practice, the more you're going to benefit. Mm-hmm. So yes, you can get benefits from just 5 or 10 minutes a day, but they're not going to be as prominent as if you practice 20, 30, 40 minutes a day.
So duration does matter. A little bit longer
Right.
is better.
There is benefits from 5 minutes a day. So there,
Sure.
when people are starting, if all you have is 5 minutes a day, that's great. You will benefit from 5 minutes a day. Just do the 5 minutes a day.
Yes. And some of your studies that look at how the cortical thickness actually improves over time. Can you tell us a bit about that? And let's first begin by defining what is cortical thickness, why does it even matter? And then maybe you can go into the results of that study.
So if you think of it like an orange, the rind is like the cortex, right? It's sort of the outermost layer of the brain. But a lot of the internal part of the brain is white matter. White matter, so again, if you think about neurons like trees with lots of branches and lots of roots, white matter is literally fat that covers the branches and the sort of the bigger parts of the roots. And it's really just sort of like the fingers that are the gray matter. Fat covering the long branches helps the signals travel faster. You know, the connections between this part of the brain and this part of the brain and that part of the brain and this part of the brain and this part of the brain and that part of the brain, right? And so it's just these massive highways. It being bigger suggests that there are more connections. And we know that as we age, the cortex gets thinner because things start to break down a little bit. One of the first studies we did, we showed that not the whole cortex, but parts of the cortex relevant to the ability to reason maintain thickness with age.
The ability to reason. So this is more decision making and more executive functioning, I'd assume.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So that was preserved with aging. Another study we did, we then brought, again, long-term meditation practitioners back, and we gave them tests of reasoning. And we showed that that the long-term meditation practitioners did better on those tests than age-matched controls. Suggesting that again, so it's not just preserving the cortex, it's actually preserving the function as well. And then we did a study where we took people 65 to 80 years old. This is the study we did over 2 years. We showed that not only did it improve over 8 weeks, it continued to improve over 2 years. So it's not just preserving it, it's actually enhancing it.
Right.
You can get better at this, in late life.
Yeah, that's so exciting. And I know you mentioned that before too, but to say that it's also reasoning, it's also your executive functions, and it actually is improving as you're aging, not just preserving, but improving as you're aging is pretty darn fantastic, right? If I were to ask you, what are the questions that are still unanswered? And you can't say there are too many, because I know there are too many. If you were to pick, top 3 or even the top 1 question that you wish somebody would answer in this space, what would that be? Or maybe another way of putting this is what's the next thing you're working on?
So many people have come up to me and said, oh my God, meditation has completely changed my life, right? And I feel that way too. And it's not just emotion regulation. There's something else going on. And so that's what my research is focusing on these days, is trying to understand what that something else is going on. It has to do with what you pay attention to. Because most of us just sort of pay attention to, we have a certain view of the world, right? And and what meditation seems to help us do is sort of think outside our normal box. And we see the world from a different perspective. And that was something that I noticed very early on. It's okay, I very quickly gained a different perspective. And then the more I practice, I've gained more and more and more perspective on the world. And it's sort of hard to explain, but you're just sort of seeing things from all different angles and, better able to understand other people's point of view. And so I think that is, for me, one of the most interesting benefits of meditation practice. And so trying to understand that and document that, that's what I've been trying to do.
I can't wait to see how you measure that, because I'm sure that's a really challenging part to this whole thing. Let's say you are new to meditation and there's someone that's listening or watching this that's completely new and wants to start.
Yes.
What would be your words of advice to this person on how to begin and maybe even how to stick to it?
Patience and self-kindness are key, and then non-judgmental. Everyone's mindfulness. The non-judging is key, because what happens is you sit there and you meditate and your mind wanders. Oh my God, my mind wanders. I can't do this. Patience, non-judgmental, right? It's yes, your mind's going to wander a lot. It's going to wander again and again and again and again. That's okay. Just keep saying that. Like there's definitely, like in the Zen tradition, they say it doesn't matter what your mind does. As long as you sit still, it doesn't matter what your mind is doing. So just sitting still does something, right? And there is some evidence for that. And so again, lots of patience, lots of kindness, lots of non-judgmentalness. I think those are probably the three key things. That it's sort of like, if you've never, ever done sports before and you decide you want to run a marathon, right? And the first day you only run 100 yards. That's okay. Just keep at it, and gradually, eventually you will get to the marathon, right? But it takes time. So patience.
Yes, and self-kindness. I love that. And I think the marathon is a great analogy, because this is a marathon that stays with you forever, and you continue doing it and just getting better and better at it. I have now for you some rapid fire questions that I'm personally super excited to ask you, because you are such a brilliant brain yourself. So I want to know what you have to say in terms of answers for these questions. Are you ready? We do some quick answers?
Yes.
Okay, great. If you could spend a day inside anyone else's brain, who would it be, and a very quick why?
A meditation teacher that is in Burma, who's a very advanced practitioner. I would love to see his brain.
And a quick why?
Just to understand and to feel that, to feel what it's like to be enlightened, basically. Yeah. So Sara Lazar, yeah.
What's your favorite brain hack or ritual for staying mentally sharp?
Oh, well, meditation.
Meditation?
Yeah.
And if you could instantly download one skill into your brain, what would it be?
Yeah, life organization.
Life organization. What's one myth about the brain that you love to see busted?
And it's such a myth about meditation. Because you see all these studies with 8 weeks and change your brain. And understanding that they're very small changes, very modest changes. Because some people are just like, oh my God, and that you start practicing and, in weeks, you're just going to become this calm Zen person that's can handle anything. Yeah, no, it takes time. Yes, you will see changes in 8 weeks, but it's the tip of the iceberg, and then it keeps more and more and more and more and more. And so you will be able to better handle, but you're still going to get reactive. And so I think that's the thing with the brain, is that people think brain change means it's completely different. It's no, it's a small difference.
Yeah.
So I think those two together, I think.
Nice. I love that one. All right. And last one book or a tool, could even be a piece of work or a person, that has changed or shifted the way that you think about something.
My first yoga teacher. Actually, it wasn't my first yoga teacher, but well, her too. It was a weekend yoga workshop, and she taught me yoga philosophy. And so that was the real start of that weekend still in my mind. There was so much I learned that weekend that just really profoundly impacted how I think about things and how I act.
Amazing. Thank you, Sara. Thank you for sharing those with us. And thank you for sharing all of the knowledge. Thank you for all the work that you do. I know I follow it closely and I love what you do. It definitely inspires me. And I'm sure to a lot of people who've heard or watched this episode today, it's going to inspire them too. Thank you again for being a guest on Think Shift.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Think Shift, where we uncover the science and stories that help us explore the incredible power of the human brain and mind. I hope this episode sparks something new for you. A fresh idea, a shift in perspective perhaps, or even a small step towards a healthier mind. If it did, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and even share it with someone who might need this conversation too. Your support helps us bring more powerful insights to curious minds like yours around the world. Next up, we've got more experts, bold ideas, and surprising discoveries coming along your way. So stay tuned. And until then, remember, big shifts start small. Stay curious and keep shifting.